This is your game, Nicholas, and welcome to it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Underrated Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss films that are underrated, underappreciated, or ones that have slipped under the radar and passed most people by. I am one of your hosts, Derek McDuff, and joining me, as always, is Ariel Ortiz.
Hello.
And this week, for our film The Game, it was brought to us by our friends over at the Films and Stuff podcast. We got Pete and Ethan here. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Derek. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
All good here. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, guys, for being on. You've had us on. Obviously, we talked about Shazam 2 recently. I was also on there talking about Avatar, so had to pay back the favor and have you guys on. And you guys chose a great film. I am always down to talk about David Fincher. Like I said, we're talking about his 1997 film, The Game, starring Michael Douglas. Definitely, I would say, one of his least seen films. Kind of has maybe been reclaimed a little bit. But I'm going to kick it to you guys first. What did you guys think of the film, and why did you pitch this to us?
Pete, what do you think?
So I remember watching it when I was very young, and it was one of the first few movies, and I guess the statute of limitations for spoilers are long gone, right? I think we're okay.
No spoilers on this
It's an
show.
80s
We're
movie.
just spoil everything.
All right, good. So I remember watching it as a kid, or not a kid, but I mean, everyone's a kid when you're younger, but still. And it was one of the first movies where there was a twist ending that was quite mind-blowing. And so for me, as a young novice movie aficionado, I was blown away by that. Like, it literally was like the only thing I could think about was, I can't believe they did that in a movie. I loved it.
Yeah. For me, go on, because to our guests still.
I mean, for me, this is. I mean, when I saw it the first time, of course, I loved the twist at the end. But what really attracted me to this movie initially was the opportunity to see Michael Douglas the way that I think he should be portrayed, right? He kind of has the same Gordon Gekko-like character that he had in Wall Street. And that's the way that I was introduced to Michael Douglas, in a way that I always think he should be portrayed. When I watched the movie for a second time in prep for the show, I knew how much I loved the movie the first time, but I was really struck by the details that I picked up and the very, very, very subtle character qualities that Fincher was really careful to sprinkle throughout the movie. And I thought, like, after watching it a second time, I loved it just for sheer entertainment value, and I loved it for like filmmaking genius the second time around. So I think it's really a rewatchable movie. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely enjoyed it. It was very surprising of the twists and the turns, even up until the end. Like, I kind of figured for the first twist to happen that yes, it is still all a game, but at the end when he like seemingly shoots his brother, I was like, oh, that's real. That's real. I was like very convinced and stuff. And then literally, when he jumps off the building and it's like, oh, it's just kind of like a sad poeticness of, because, you know, of his father killing himself the same way. And then, they kind of let you linger for so long, because he falls for a while until like he breaks through, and then they catch him. And then it turns out that it's like it's even then it was a game, and it took me by surprise. I very much enjoyed it. Like I was saying before, Fincher has this way of creating these like very incredible twists and turns, and very much so is really good at doing them early and keeping you still engaged for going forward. For, you know, iconically for him of like not introducing John Doe in 7 until like the third act, essentially at the start of the third act. And it's kind of the same way for this one with that first twist, with shooting his brother and stuff. Or at that point it was like a couple of twists, but for me that was like the first like possible like reality twist, in my opinion, or at least how I was feeling while watching it. And like, yeah, you still get engaged. He like literally you get caught in the jump pad as just like Michael Douglas in that moment, you know, kind of being like taken aback of like, oh, everything's okay, all right. And then yeah, it, like Michael Douglas, going off of what you said, like, yeah, he definitely is like a Gordon Gekko kind of character. The movie also reminded me a lot of, like, of course, with like a character like that of a Christmas Carol kind of thing, but where you know, like, he's kind of not living his past and stuff like that, but more so just learning the way of living again, which is like very much so in the beginning he wasn't living, you know, he was just kind of like in his own way going with the flow. He wasn't necessarily like a bad guy. He was, you know, an investment banker, but, you know, not like he wasn't like trying to like bankrupt people. He was actually like he was just doing his job and trying to do the best.
He didn't give that guy toilet paper. That he was a dick.
Well, he was in the middle of like the game at that point. He was like on edge of everybody.
That was the beginning.
Like,
that was the beginning. He wasn't even in the game yet.
But yeah, like, I mean, like, even to that guy, you know, that he had to fire. He tried to, like, you know, I'm giving you a good settlement, it's fair, you're gonna, you know, live a good life with this kind of thing. And like, so, you know, he's ruthless, he's good at his job, but he isn't like, you know, at the end of the day, he's trying to do the best for people. And like, looking back at all the movie entirely, you could see, like, very much so, like, yeah, like, the brother really did care about him. And I think having the foresight of the ending, you see that he saw his brother following the same path that their father did, in a way of just kind of like just living life, just like just trying to just making as much as you can, but then without, you know, the purpose of living. So that, like, he gives that gift to him in a way. But yeah, it was very interesting, very good thriller, very engaging, and it just leaves you it literally leaves you like thinking and second guessing yourself and where this movie's going, and like just up until the end, until that party, till the, you know, the glass shatters, essentially.
Yeah, no, I think you really hit it, Ariel, because this is, you know, we were kind of talking before we got on mic about how there's most movies you could be like, okay, I don't know exactly how they're going to get to the ending, but I know what the ending is going to be. But this one really does keep you kind of wondering, oh, is this for real? Is this a game? Like, what is happening here? What's going on? Because it gives you a lot of reasons to believe A or B, and it kind of has you oscillating between back and forth. Like you mentioned earlier, you're like, oh, this seems like definitely a game, and he shoots his brother, and it's like, oh no, it's not, but yes, it is. But yeah, it is definitely a modern Christmas Carol. That's something that Fincher has come out and said, like, and I think it does a really good job of that. I kind of disagree with you saying that you think he's a good guy at the beginning. I really think he does suck at the beginning. I think he's a very Scrooge-like bad character who is just kind of just like Scrooge, just ruthless. All he cares about money. He doesn't care about people, but he's also very tragic. He is, like you said, stuck in that same cycle that his father went through, and he kind of has to, like Scrooge with the ghosts, see the error of his ways and goes on this journey to make him a different person. But instead of using like spirits and magic and stuff like that, it's a modern Christmas Carol that is using a company that seems to be just like in control of everything all the time. That did take me out of a little bit. I was like, okay, they are just like kind of, I'm like, how did they manage to completely get every single detail. Like, I'm like, what if he just went off the roof 5 feet to the left or to the right? I'm like, whatever. That's a movie. I'll suspend my disbelief, but it did become a little much at times.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I really do like this movie. I love David Fincher, but it's one of those movies that I feel like watching it, I'm really enjoying it, but all of the parts are less than the sum, if that makes sense. Where I'm like, it didn't work as a kind of cohesive thing. Ironically, because the poster is all puzzle pieces, the puzzle pieces didn't quite fit together for me. I do think for me the third act doesn't really come together as much as I would like, unfortunately. And that's something that David Fincher himself has said. He thinks this movie does have third act problems. But overall, I really did like it. I think it is probably, and this is saying something because he's an amazing actor, this is probably Michael Douglas's best performance. Like, he is so freaking good in this. Like you said, this is a part that these are the kind of roles that he absolutely should play. He starts as that very Gordon Gekko-esque character, but you get to see him have this really incredible arc in this. And as just a character piece alone, this movie absolutely hit the mark for me.
I thought the scene where he did his best work was when he came out of that grave in Mexico.
Yeah.
He was so believable as a wealthy person who was absolutely humbled and shell-shocked and just desperate to do anything. I thought that every scene there, the look on his face and the makeup that they did on him to show him kind of like with the scrapes on his nose and his face, but just the way that he was, like his facial features when he's kind of sitting on this, the back of a bus with all these other immigrants, he's sitting in the back of a truck with a bunch of chickens. I thought that was just incredible work by him to try to balance the idea of being, I'm super, super wealthy, but I actually have nothing on my person right now, and I'm absolutely desperate. I thought that was just incredible series of scenes with him, and he did really, really believable work in that.
Yeah, that whole ending, especially when he starts to go a little bit unhinged, and it's reminiscent of his performance in Falling Down, where he's at the zoo with the gun, which is something you could do in '97, but you couldn't do today. I thought that was a little interesting, but he's just like, yeah, I saw you at the Chinese
restaurant. You could do it
restaurant.
in real life, but okay.
But he's just now they have metal detectors and stuff, but he's just he's yeah, let's go. And he's so freaking good. He just brings it to another level, and he's bringing out all of the best. It's all the hits of Michael Douglas's career are really coming together in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I did in that moment. I did like that he didn't lose his capability. He was it was a nuanced experience to not have money and resources, but it still showed that he was still capable of getting himself home and kind of thing. That I did enjoy that, but it is also acts as a humbling kind of situation, but then also it's a teaching situation of that doesn't define you. And I think that was kind of the point of that moment in Mexico and stuff, is that you're not solely your money or your wealth. You're your own person in a way. And it's just there's the girl, once it was kind of revealed that she was a part of it, was a very interesting thing. And then also to that she's kind of the, not the mastermind, but kind of this is very much reminiscent of video games kind of thing. So a kind of a developer or director of a video game. That's kind of what her role was. And I don't know if it's just because my I know Grand Theft Auto and all that stuff, that I think that kind of idea of things made it more believable that he was living in this world that was controllable. I think from the point of once the game started, the the people that were in charge just essentially cleared out and mapped out their own world in a way. He was just kind of a person in a video game kind of thing. So it's a little bit more of a believable thing for me, just because of like, yeah, they just like essentially created a GTA around him.
But
It's such a. I wouldn't be like him at the end where I was like asking the girl out. I'd have been like, I'm okay with you, but I don't know. I don't know if there was really a connection kind of thing. And she even questions that. She's like, you don't even know me? Kind of thing. He's like, well, I would like to get to know you and stuff. And he's like, okay. But
she's great, by the way. Deborah Unger. I haven't really seen her in anything else, but she's so good in this.
I agree. Her IMDb, I looked the same thing because she's wonderful, and it seemed like she was going to be like a breakout star. I mean, she's supporting Michael Douglas and Sean Penn, and her career just kind of like flatlined. And the other two obviously are went on to much more.
She's got like a bit part in Silent Hill. I think that's the only other thing I've really seen her in.
Yeah.
Or like not bit part, but like a supporting part. Like she's like fifth build. It's weird that she never like broke out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just saying, to your point though, Ariel and Derek, actually, so what you were saying, you know, like the suspension of disbelief about what if he was 5 feet to the left when he jumped off the building, or, you know, like how they orchestrated this whole Mexico thing, and, you know, the fake kidnapping or whatever you want to call it, right? What I liked is that if this movie were made today, I can't help but feel that there would be almost like an Ocean's 11 element, where at the end of the movie they would kind of drop the curtain and show you how they set everything up. You know, like at the end of all the Ocean's 11 movies.
Oh yeah.
They did
a little bit of that. They were like, "There's divers," and they but you know
what I mean, right?
A second on,
And what I really appreciated about that, and of course this is now on the second, third, fifth watch, and also as a much older person now versus, you know, 25 years ago when it first came out, you appreciate that Fincher trusted the audience, and that this isn't that kind of movie where they have to show you everything behind the curtain. I mean, like, look, I love the Ocean's 11 movies. I love the heist movies in general. So it's always fun to see the montage of, oh, we're on to you, and we know you're on to us, but we're on to you being on to us. You know, so
right.
Yeah.
We don't need to see any of that in this movie, and I'm actually glad that he restrained. And maybe that wasn't so much of a trope back then. Nowadays, it's much more of a trope, which is why I think that, you know, if the game were made in 2023, some director would be very tempted to be like, oh, well, this is how we set everything up, wink, wink, and kind of ruin the whole thing, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's also like it lends itself to like the thought of that they essentially studied his psyche for a whole day, and like it's assumed that they have very professional like psychologists, psychotherapists, and all those kind of things, that they essentially, this group they know you in and out, and that's why the experience is supposedly so life-changing, is because like they know you on a mental level, and yeah, like if you just like study somebody and their mannerisms, you could definitely kind of predict on what exactly they're gonna do, what exactly they're actually gonna say, you know, kind of thing. So I liked that. I liked that, and kind of thinking back on it, it like it does, like you're saying, it doesn't say like how they did it and stuff like that, but you get the essence that this group that runs the game are like very well, they have the reputation that they have for a reason, kind of thing, of like they're very, very, very capable.
One thing too, I like that they don't show how much it costs, because you're like, for them to put on like this level, like it's got to be something insane, like it's got to be like crazy amount of money, and that would really that would really age the movie if they like show you the check and it's like in $1997 and you're like, oh, that's like nothing today. So I do appreciate that he just kind of has this reaction like, oh, okay, let's split it, Sean Penn.
Yeah, but you know, you raise a really good point, because when I took a few notes having watched this, a lot of things age this movie in terms of, you know,
Oh,
not
yeah.
just tech. Obviously, we saw the old
I was very
tube style TVs.
one thing. Yeah, one tech thing that I was like very surprised that it existed back then was it wasn't Bluetooth, but you know, he had a phone that, you know, he could like click on and off on in his car and stuff, speak through the speaker of his car. And I was like, oh, those existed back then?
For the
I'm
super
like,
rich.
you know,
Yeah,
I know.
but you know
That's why
what's
Big
funny?
Van
I
Horton
didn't know.
dollars.
But what's really
didn't know
funny
about it.
is that the idea of wealth has changed so much from like the 50s, 60s up till today. Like back in the day, right? Like we thought the epitome of wealth, and by we, I mean society probably thought the epitome of wealth was a yacht, a guy with like a smoking jacket and a Commodore's hat and a cigar, country clubs, golf estates, and then in the 90s with the game, it was, you know, a BMW in San Francisco. Apparently, no one else on the roads for whatever reason. And then
Yeah.
now
They were that good. They shut down the roads.
Yeah.
They could
And
have.
now the
I wouldn't be
idea of
surprised.
ultra wealth is more like Succession or Billions, right? Which is like
Yeah, or like fucking buying Twitter.
Exactly, right? Like these high glass walled buildings, that kind of thing. So I just like, for me, his idea of wealth in the 90s is kind of like old fashioned and laughable today, right? And it's not even that long ago.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Things have really changed with all of that, and you know, maybe we need to give a couple of the billionaires and millionaires the game treatment. Maybe we'll have a little bit better of a world.
Oh my god.
What did you think of the performance by Sean Penn? Because I think this is the first time, like, Sean Penn to me is just like a political activist. I think this is the first time I've really seen a Sean Penn movie other than maybe Platoon. What did you guys think of his performance?
Oh, I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I've watched a good amount of Sean Penn movies. Like, you know, I've watched Mystic River, you know, I Am Sam, you know, a good amount of his movies and stuff. And I think this was like a young Sean Penn kind of esque, you know, kind of thing, like kind of elements of Fast Times at Ridgemont High's character, a little bit of just kind of like the recklessness, and so it made it a little bit more believable that he was kind of this, but then also alongside, like, you know, Sean Penn transitioning into these like more dramatic movies. Yeah, this movie, his character kind of like had that kind of feel as well. Like, you get the sense of like he was a slacker and stuff, but then he went through this experience, and then by the end of it, when he like is talking to his brother, and it shows it's a detriment to Michael Douglas's acting, of that you get that sense of respect that he didn't have for him at the beginning, and that kind of shows that, like, yeah, he's not a slacker anymore. He's actually like a pretty like responsible kind of person now, possibly, and so it's pretty cool to see that kind of character in him, and it made it even more like believable of like when he's acting freaked out and stuff in the middle of the game, of that you alongside Michael Douglas would believe that kind of thing, that, oh, he fucked up and stuff like that, and that of course he would get, you know, his brother in trouble because he was getting himself out of trouble, because that's been their history, and so it even like you alongside like Michael Douglas are like make it furthers the belief that this whole thing's real, you know, kind of thing. So but I did like his character, and I think he plays crazy and really good.
Yeah.
And losing his mind very well.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I enjoyed his little part in this.
Yeah, I thought
big part.
Yeah,
but.
yeah. I thought he was really good, you know, like obviously like he's a shitty person, but like he's a very good actor, and like, yeah, he just gives this absolutely, like you were saying, Ariel, great unhinged performance where it's almost like Charlie Sheen-esque, where he's just like you believe that this guy is some like horrible nepo baby who's just like strung out and just like spends all his money on just like that he's inherited from his family on drugs, and he's the black sheep fuck up brother that nobody talks about. But yeah, that's something I didn't even really consider. That he obviously went through his own game because he was had all this money and just blowing on everything, and somebody was like, hey, I need to get him back on board. Need to get him on the straight and narrow.
That's so cool to think about. Yeah.
So
yeah.
you think he was gifted the game as well, or do you think he's because there's been ones that have sought out the game?
I think he was absolutely gifted. I think that somebody was like, hey, he's a nice guy, but man, he's always on coke. Like whenever he's on coke, he's like fucking things up and just like smashing tables and doing all this stuff. So we need to get him on the game and get him to straighten his life out. And then he straightens his life out and he's like, wow, this guy did this for me. I need to pass this on to my brother because I don't want to see what happened to my brother happen to my dad. So I do think, somebody, because he is a character who is...
Because he didn't know the price of the game, right? Like that kind of thing, too. Of like, because wouldn't it have been more knowledgeable of how much it was going to cost? I don't remember.
He said I think he knew what it cost, and then also I think it does vary depending on varies depending on person.
What they do.
Yeah. So who knows what his game was? That would be interesting.
Oh,
I'm not saying I want to see a prequel to this, but like if they did it, like that's what I would see. Is like, okay, yeah, what was the game?
Mm-hmm. No, going off of that prequel kind of idea, I think while a movie might not be like a remake might not be, but I would very much be interested, especially like David Fincher has gone into like television of late with like Mindhunter and stuff like that. I would very much be interested in him doing the game show. But not pun unintended.
A CRS show.
Come on down.
A CRS show. Yes, that would be great.
Nick Van Orden,
but like
spin the wheel.
Of a different, like it could be an anthology kind of thing, or just a single season. If it's anthology, it could be like a different person each season, like
it's a
just
super
like
good
mini
idea,
series kind of thing.
That's a super good idea.
Yeah.
No, and then maybe like he could do it like he's very good at like setting up these shows, being a showrunner. So maybe he could like like he did with House of Cards or something, just direct the first episode and then have his director buddies do each one does their own game and each kind of their own spin on. That'd be cool. I would like to see that. But yeah, we were kind of touching on before we were on mic that this one is really interesting because it comes at a very kind of pivotal point in Fincher's career. Obviously, he had been a director working on music videos for a long time. He came up in the 90s with that same crop of like guys like Michael Bay and everything. And then he makes Alien 3, which he had no control over, and that movie kind of got taken away from him. Then he makes 7, and it becomes a huge hit. Mm-hmm. And he was working on this for a while, and then with 7, he gets that blank check. He is able to cast Michael Douglas and do all this stuff. And then he makes the game, which is kind of underwhelming, at least for audiences at the time. Isn't a huge hit, but then he comes right back and makes Fight Club, which is still his most famous movie. It's still on fucking dorm room walls. So I think this movie does tend to get a little bit overshadowed and forgotten of his like late 90s just really stellar run. So I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on just kind of this one sitting weirdly between these two.
I mean, part of that I think is the absence of compelling action in the game, right? I mean, it's really dealing with these like the subtleties of kind of loneliness, right? You see Michael Douglas's loneliness so often. He's a very quiet character. And I think that the few action scenes we've seen in this movie are really not, I don't want to call them set pieces, but they're not really great action pieces. They kind of pop up over nothing and then they're quickly done, right? So we saw kind of the car into the river, but that's a very fast scene, right? That we saw when he goes to the lady's house to kind of confront her and he sees like her furniture is fake, and then there's some bizarre dramatic machine gun shootout, right? I mean, there's few action scenes in here. It's really about, loneliness and setting up the idea of the thriller, and this company is like intended to be kind of like stalking him, and where's this all going? So I think
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that the box office acclaim was a little bit muted, is it just doesn't kind of lend itself to these very dramatic, like dormitory, posters or any memorable quotes or things like this. I think it's the subtleties of this film which are so brilliant, but it's not really the action scenes. Fight Club obviously is a little bit the opposite, right? It's the fight scenes and the action scenes are so overwhelming that you kind of miss the subtleties of the message that's trying to be gotten across.
Yeah, and it's not even like a really like film buffy movie either, like The Social Network is, where like people who are like, oh, I'm so into film, it doesn't have those kind of like prestige-y vibe. Like it's a very good story and everything, and it's really well directed, but doesn't feel like a prestige movie either.
I think it's because of the psychological element. I don't know what the breakdowns are, and I'm sure I wouldn't be able to find them very easily, but I imagine the game did reasonably well in the home video market. Or even on the television market, much more so than in the cinema. I think Fight Club and I think Seven especially was a lot more visceral, because Seven I think was also a little bit psychological, but still it was Brad Pitt, it was still Morgan Freeman, there was still, and then of course you had the Seven Deadly Sins, so there's a lot more appeal that way, because you're seeing something that you would not normally see in the cinema, right? Whether it's all these different kinds of murders and things like that, Kevin Spacey, so forth. And whereas the game, I think, equally, maybe, in fact, not equally, probably more of a mind trip than even Seven, and even, I would argue, Fight Club. But I think in terms of cinema, the impact is probably way higher for those movies than it is for the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going off like exactly what you're saying, I think this one doesn't lend itself to like a hook or have a memorable like dialogue or monologue like that Seven and Fight Club especially have. Like Fight Club, there's so many moments in that movie that are visceral, that get embedded in your mind. And then of course with Seven, the whole what's in the box scene is just like such an iconic scene.
And I mean, with all due respect to Michael Douglas, he's a very handsome man, but Michael Douglas in 1997 versus a very much in prime Brad Pitt. Shirtless, listening to the Pixies as buildings are blowing up. I would take those two, watching a building blowing up, over a very slow motion take of Michael Douglas falling off a building into an airbag, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, exactly. It's like, I would describe the game as quiet, whereas, Seven and especially Fight Club, they're just like, they're loud, kind of thing. They that's just the first kind of like thing that come into my head.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to circle real fast back to something I think you were saying, Ethan, about like the loneliness that is just inherent in his character. And I found all of that, now that you mentioned, like thinking about it more and more, that is really interesting. And it's something that Fincher does come back to a few times. And it's just this kind of, the sadness that comes with just being a single dude, like a single aging dude in society, and trying to fill your life with all these things because society says, oh, to be a success, you've got to make a lot of money and you've got to be successful in business and have the Cadillacs and just kind of have like a sleazy life and all this stuff. And I think that toxic masculinity is something that this movie is really commenting on in a very smart and subtle way. And I love that it kind of almost predicts alternate reality games that would like become big in like maybe like 5 years, 10 years after this, and just kind of rolls that all into a way to just kind of say that like, yeah, like this way, this is what society tells men about, like, you have to wear a suit, you have to do this, you have to be promiscuous, all this shit is bullshit. And it's all about living for like just like very Dickensian. Just it's all about living for your fellow man.
So
I have to disagree with. It's not. I wouldn't categorize it as toxic masculinity per se. It's very much just the idea of success, because I definitely connected with Michael Douglas in that way of just like me being a professional of how and looking and seeing like how much sacrifice that I've had to do to get to the place where I am in my career. And yeah, it lends itself to loneliness. It lends itself to like sacrificing your enjoyment of life, or somewhat, because you're trying to just get to a place where you are told to be that is comfortable, kind of thing. I think like maybe at the time it was toxic masculinity, but in nowadays it's like branched out, just because of how society has grown, thankfully.
Yes, the glass ceiling in toxicity has been broken.
Yeah. So I wouldn't lend itself to it being just about toxic masculinity. I would more so like situate it as just the overall idea of success. So yeah.
I mean, the
Success
way
and
that
maybe the power that
a power
right
success.
that
I hate that
dynamic
book.
that you need to gain power, and once you have it, what you do, like how you maintain it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's just very much so like having this feeling of like, this is what I have to be doing kind of thing, instead of like, is this what I should be doing kind of. So
I felt that the Michael
Definitely.
Douglas character wasn't really intended to be portrayed as a bad person. Like, I mean, there were a few
I
kind
agree
of
with that.
subtleties that you can say, like, okay, he wasn't like a super friendly guy, but he wasn't really a bad person. I think it was, and I didn't catch it the first time, but the second time, I really saw that like he was portrayed to be lonely, and that's what was leading up to this like potential suicide at the end, right? He was always
Yeah.
driving by himself. He was eating dinner alone by himself. Like you really got this impression of kind of like all the spaces around him were always large and empty. And I don't think he even perceived himself as being lonely or unhappy. We know that his wife kind of left him because he was maybe working too much. And I think it was just kind of the impression that Fincher was slowly trying to build up, which is once he shot his brother, who's kind of the only friend that he had, right? The only person he has social dinner with, the only person he kind of lets his guard down about. Once he lost his brother, he's like, I've got nothing else. And that's was, I think, supposed to be the buildup to his suicide. But I don't think he was necessarily supposedly a bad guy. Like Gordon Gekko was an asshole.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think
Yeah.
Nicholas Van Norton was bad. He was successful, and he wasn't like super friendly, but he was just lonely more than anything.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I feel like it, and you get that. I love the mirroring of him and his father.
Yeah.
Well, you don't get introduced to the father at all. You just see the flashbacks that that he's remembering and stuff like that. But that tells so much of a story, kind of thing of like the whole home video kind of aspect of like that his father was present, but then it shows that he was like distant.
Yeah.
And then he like slowly like then it cuts to like him essentially walking away, and he walks into like the darkness in those home videos, and then you kind of get the remembrance of like him being on the roof and then jumping. So I really did enjoy the mirroring of that, and I do like I agree with you of like how, because it like you could get that sense that like he wasn't a bad guy, because his ex-wife was like very concerned for him, that he was just, and she's like, are you okay, kind of thing, and he was hurt. Like I definitely could believe that she left him because he was working too much.
Yeah.
And she even says like kind of pleading like but in a way of like, this is like it just does it naturally because she's had to do it for so long, of like don't work yourself too hard, or like don't work so late. and then but he kind of like pushes that off because he's like scared to let somebody in. You know, definitely kind of like trauma of like of seeing his dad fall and stuff, like, and seeing his body and stuff. That was crazy. That was the craziest part, where I was like, oh man, they took that too far on him. They like, I like where they positioned the clown. Was it the clown?
Yeah.
Or as like as how his dad's body was. I was like, dang, they're not, and it was like the first thing that happened. I was like, they're not messing around. They just hit him in the feels right away. So I did definitely enjoyed that, and like you get that sense of like you know, they're well off, and it is very much a you know, family wealth kind of thing, but you get at least for me, I got the sense more so that he was like just a numb person than like overall like evil, like Gordon Gekko kind of thing. Yeah.
I would say, I want to just clarify what I meant is like, I don't think like I ever thought he was like a bad person down to his core and his soul, but I felt like he is someone who dealt with a lot of tragedy and hardships and adversity in his life and closed himself off to the parts of himself that were good, and became a very cold, hollow shell of the person. And I think, you know, just like Scrooge, just like how you see the flashbacks to Scrooge's childhood, and you see that he had, you know, a lot of love in his life when he was younger, but you know, he lost a lot of things and became this kind of cruel person. And I would say, you know, to me at least, that's kind of what I saw happen with him, and it was about just like Christmas Carol was about redeeming Scrooge. This was a lot about redeeming Nick Van Orton to me.
I think.
But no, go ahead.
Sorry, I just thought that, you know, one of the things that I was looking at after seeing the movie, which I found interesting, was that we've seen Michael Douglas play like this real hard ass, right? Mm-hmm. Gordon Gekko, we've seen him in and then in The Game, where he's just like this ruthless, no nonsense business guy. But what's interesting was he was coming off, I think, in the last couple of years also as the guy who was on the other side of the power dynamic, right? Because he was in Disclosure before, where he's the male victim of sexual harassment, and Basic Instinct too, right? I think that was reasonably.
Well, Basic Instinct, he instigates it.
Yeah.
He instigates it
though, attraction
at the beginning. Yeah.
Fair enough. You're right. That's actually true. So let's remove that.
I wouldn't say Basic Instinct, because he's very much part of it.
I don't know what it is, but Michael Douglas, for me, I see not as the guy on the weaker side. I think he comes off at his best when he's kind of like this gruff, angry, no nonsense business guy, or even like the guy he was in Falling Down, right? Where he's kind of like losing his mind, but he's taking care of it his way. And he's kind of taking everything into his own hands, which is, you kind of see a little bit of that at the beginning of this movie, and it starts slipping away at the end of this movie, at the third act especially. And I know, Ariel, you mentioned it about him not getting together, but asking the girl out on a date, right? At the end of the movie, and how that's kind of weird. I think that was just him also kind of not getting back on the saddle, as
letting
it were,
loose,
taking a little bit of control back, right? Where he's just like, okay, this is what I want.
And allowing himself to open up to a relationship with someone else, because he wouldn't let himself be vulnerable enough to do that at the start, you know? So
for that reason, I'm not forgiving Marvel for casting him as Dr. Hank Pym and totally ruining my image of what Michael Douglas should be in.
I would disagree, because Ethan exactly explained what Hank Pym talks about as ants, like he did it his own way. You do not underestimate the ants. So he's like,
Michael Douglas, Hank Pym of the comics is probably more aligned to the Michael Douglas that you're thinking of, because the Hank Pym of the comics was like this ultra genius, but he wasn't like this pseudo hippie character that we see in the movies.
Yeah.
He's not a good dude.
He's
Yeah.
not a good dude at all.
Yeah,
in the comics.
if you want to see Michael Douglas play like
diabolical
of this way, go and watch what if episode.
Oh yeah.
Of
that is a good point. Yeah,
Kill the Avengers. Like
oh yeah,
he did the voice in that too, right?
He is. Yeah, he did the voice.
He's phenomenal.
But
he's phenomenal.
That is very much the comic accurate Hank Pym, because comic accurate Hank Pym is very much not like, he's like one of the worst characters.
Yeah, I'll say he has some things in common with Sean Penn. That's all I'll say.
All right.
But on that note, before we wrap up, did you guys have any final thoughts on anything with the game?
We didn't talk about the soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean,
is this Trent Reznor, or is this before they start collaborating?
I'm not sure where all the music is from. Some of it's a soundtrack, and some of it's just the music. But
the soundtrack. Not okay. Yeah.
But I don't think anyone does it better than Fincher in terms of kind of setting the scenes with, whether it's a song with lyrics or whether it's just kind of like background music. I thought he did an exceptional job. Kind of pairing the music to what you were supposed to be feeling in each scene.
Yeah,
I thought it was.
He always is really good with needle drops, like across his career.
Yeah. So I mean, it's something that in a lot of films I don't notice, but in this one I thought it was just fantastic the way that he set it up. It was silent at the right times. The pace was right. I thought it was just really a masterpiece in terms of how he set that up.
Yeah, and I will clarify that I did just look it up, and the score was done by Howard Shore, who famously did The Lord of the Rings, but also had worked with him on Seven just previously.
All right.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, but the soundtrack, which we were talking, it just feels really good. I mean, it definitely gets you into that sense of the 80s stockbroker kind of feel of things, which was like in a heyday at that time, like with this. And then I don't know how much of it in Wall Street, but you kind of get the sense of it, like they kind of bring it back a little bit in The Wolf of Wall Street with that kind of music and stuff of the time. In that feel. But yeah, this just like the soundtrack just kind of like kept you suspense when it made you, it helped elevate the suspense for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, I just have one more question, and without actually saying any spoilers, just in case people haven't seen it.
Going back to the soundtrack. That's the one moment that I was like, I just got reminded. The usage of White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, perfect. That was like the perfect usage of White Rabbit. So perfect. I love that moment. Yeah.
Nice. But yeah, my questions to you guys is just without spoilers, what's one of your movie what's a movie that really its ending caught you off guard, where you were like, that's a great twist, I did not see that coming?
Another movie other than this one?
Yeah, I'll start from me. It was The Prestige. The Prestige, and we've talked about it. Was
that
one of our early
excellent
episodes.
movie.
Fantastic.
That movie, it just made me be like, it's one of those movies where I was like, I have to go back and watch this again. And I will say too, like watching the game a second time, because I watched it like maybe a year or two ago, was one of the last Fincher. I think it was the last Fincher movie I hadn't seen. Went back and I watched it the first time. I was like, I don't know if that worked for me. It worked for me a lot better the second go around. So yeah, what's a movie with a great twist where you like have a new appreciation for everything, knowing the ending and going back through? But hold on,
The Prestige had kind of like what Pete was saying. It had kind of like an Ocean's 11 like explanation at the end of it, right?
Oh yeah, a little,
but you catch so much stuff like in that second go through. You're like, that's why she said that, because my god, yeah.
And when they say, and then how they say, it's one of my favorite Christopher Nolan movies.
It is
if not movie. My favorite Christopher Nolan movie, but no, the whole like, do you love me today? No, not today. I love it.
I mean, I would go, the first one that pops into my mind is probably The Sixth Sense. I mean, I thought
Yeah.
that was a very, very good twist at the end, and it was also somewhere between like heartwarming and like emotionally redeeming for all the characters. You know, it wasn't just kind of like a plot twist, but it meant something at the end. Pete, can you remind me of anything else? What else are you
So
thinking?
I think for me, one of the more famous ones is probably The Usual Suspects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also really liked the ending of Memento.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No
I
one's
th-
got some good twists.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like that twist of Memento.
Yeah.
I think of all of his movies. Actually, I think that's true for even M. Night. Is the twists at the earlier part of their careers were probably the most impactful, and I think it's also because we then kind of almost expect it in the next ones. I mean, that's certainly the case for M. Night Shyamalan, right? It's like every movie of his has got to have some kind of twist.
Yeah.
So
the twist, I'll just say this: the twist in the Knock at the Cabin is there is no twist. It's
Well,
just plain
yeah.
straight,
which is
great.
Which is I mean, it's so meta that way, but
yeah.
So I think the Usual Suspects, the reveal, I thought was done very masterfully, but otherwise I thought in terms of like a mind-blowing twist, it was probably Memento for me.
Okay, good call.
Mm-hmm.
Ariel?
Yeah, I'm just like looking through them. There's just some like just of a fun one, like Now You See It. I
Now You See
love
Me?
I have no now You See It.
Now You See It?
Oh, it's Now You See Me.
Yeah.
Oh, is it Now You See Me? Yeah.
Yeah,
Now You
the
See
Mark
Me.
Ruffalo magic Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah, Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah. I love the twist of that one. It's just like it's one of my like a fun like pop it in rewatchable movie for that one. I think Parasite has in recent years. Parasite has had like a really good twist, but that's not Parasite. Like it's per se at the end. Oh goodness me!
You know which movie I used to really love, and it was I think it was early 2000s. It was Swordfish, which has
I've actually never seen that.
That one's a rough one.
Yeah.
Travolta, Jackman, Halle Berry, Don Cheadle.
That one is up for interpretation, and
I mean,
is up for liking.
I will say though, Ariel, that's kind of how I feel about Now You See Me. So,
well, yeah, but like I said, it's just not like quoting Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But it's a fun one. Like I said, it's a fun one. Swordfish is a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, like
games.
It's just out there. It's just so out there of a twist. That's the thing.
But movies like that, there's loads, right? There's like. What was it? Lucky Number 11?
11?
Yeah.
11, yeah. Lucky Number
Josh
11
Hartnett.
Right, where it's kind of like the twist isn't that huge of a twist, and you can probably see it coming a mile away, but it's still fun to see, right? And the same goes for Swordfish, which is, it's not I can see dead people kind of twist at all. It's just but it's still fun to see how they execute it at the end.
It's who's the bad guy.
It's exactly the same for Ocean's 11 and that series.
Yeah, it's just a weird one. I mean, a classic, Shutter Island.
Shutter Island's great. Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah. Smoking Aces, I will say, also, that's a really good.
That's one that kind of lends itself to like a Ocean's 11 breakdown. But yeah, definitely
Smoking Aces with Jeremy Piven and Ryan Reynolds. Oh man.
Yeah, we did it with JPG. Yeah.
It's one of Ray
Liotta.
When we talked about that one, I was like, I love this movie. I've loved it since the first time I watched it.
Common was in that? Yeah. Oh man, I have to
Common was so good. He was so good. Yeah, really great cast in that movie. Chris Pine.
Andy Garcia. Man, I have to watch it. Alicia Keys, that's right. Wow.
I have to rewatch this. I remember seeing it, but I don't remember it.
Oh yeah. It was
another fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead, Ariel.
Another fun one of recent years is like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood too. that whole twist of like
I
just like
love that
Yeah.
movie.
I would
classic
say-
Tarantino
I love
Yeah,
that
I will
movie.
say-
way of
Yeah.
just like
he-
let's change history.
That's
kind of
great,
thing.
but like
Yeah.
but I after seeing Inglorious Bastards, I liked it. Like I was like, I know where you're going with this one, Quentin, because you already did it
Yeah.
in Inglorious Bastards, and I love
Yeah,
the twist.
I know,
Like
but-
Inglorious Bastards really got me. So choosing between the two of those, Inglorious Bastards is the like it's both. They're both great, but like I'm like,
Mhm.
it's just the piece de resistance in Inglorious Bastards. But yeah, all very very good ones. And a very great film. I'm really glad we got to talk about it. A really interesting one to dive into. You know, like I said, there's all these great pieces of it that I've really had a great time dissecting. So thank you again, guys, for picking it and coming on. Where can people listen to you guys and hear some more of your stuff?
Thank you. We're available wherever you're listening to this now. We're probably there. Otherwise, we're the Films and Stuff Podcast, www.filmsandstuffpodcast.com. But yeah, we're wherever you're listening to this, we're probably there as well.
Awesome. And yeah, thank you guys out there for listening. If you want to go ahead and give us a rating, we always appreciate a 5-star rating. But you know, just if you liked what we hear, we do some other stuff too. We have been the Undercast Company, myself, Ariel, and then our co-host Alan as well. We do a couple other podcasts, including Ariel's podcast, You've Never Seen, where she introduces someone to a movie they should have seen by this point, or someone introduces her to a movie that she should have seen by this point, either way. And then I also do a Marvel podcast whenever there's a new Marvel film, and I do my podcast, Can I Say Something, with my friend Damien. So we do have a lot of, what's it called? What stokes in the fire, I guess is what this was saying. So definitely check all that out. Check out Films and Stuff. We've got our Patreon as well, or just follow us everywhere at Undercast Company. We really appreciate you guys listening, and thank you once again, guys, for guesting. I'll see you all next time.
Always a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for being here.